Hey Knights, so these are the last two chapters, and then the epilogue will be the next video. So chapter, I believe, 23. It's chapter 23, the end of the road. 72 hours. The doctor froze when he heard the crack, but he didn't dare to believe what had happened when the breach closed. When the breach closed down, systems closed, the computer announced. He dropped down and ran for the wall, reaching Jessie's side. He looked down at her in horror, seeing where her skull had caved in, blood staining her hair. He swallowed, seeing her eyes wide open, but staring at nothing. No. He still couldn't, but he still knew, and even then he knelt down to check her neck. That made it seem like the floor dropped out from underneath him. Nothing. He took a deep breath, sitting back on his heels, looking down at Jessie. You stubborn girl, he managed to say, shaking his head. You just had to let go. Of course, he didn't get an answer, and he still didn't know how to take this. Because even though he knew it was true, he kept denying it. Jessie was dead as a doornail, to use Charles Dickens' words. He shook his head when another thought froze him. The SHIELD team. I'm dead, he whispered in shock. Director? Gemma had paid little attention to the SHIELD agent who had just entered the room. Director Fury barely looking up. Yes? There are people here who say this is an emergency. Then tell them I'm busy. The agent left, and Fury looked down at Coulson. Hydra? Mainly wiped out, Coulson replied, folding his arms. There are still a few who haven't rooted out yet. Gemma frowned at her phone. I still haven't gotten a reply from Skye. You'd think she'd be done with her op by now, Fitz said, frowning as well. May shrugged. Maybe she was caught up with something else. Fury straightened. When you get in contact with her, tell her to report back here ASAP. We'll need her help with... Sir? That agent was back again. Fury turned, looking annoyed. Yes? The agent swelled. They said they believe it to be of utmost importance. Oh, did they say why? The agent shook his head. There is one, though, who said something about Cardiff, a big green thing, and an extraplater. Gemma straightened instantly. Description, she ordered. Agent Simmons, Fury said, turning to her. But Fitz had straightened as well. Their description, he demanded. The agent nodded. World War II style coat, dark hair, American, but his companions are Welsh. Gemma's eyes widened, and she ran past the agent instantly. Agent Simmons, Fury barked, but she kept running. She made it to the waiting area, and she stopped short in surprise. Standing there, arms folded, was one certain and very alive. Jack, she whispered. He turned, a grim smile on his face. Hey, Jesme. She ran at him, and he hugged her tightly. I thought you were on that station. I was, he admitted, shaking his head with Fitz as Coulson, May, and Fury joined him. And then I came back. He turned to his companions as they stood from their seats. These are two other members of my team, Ayanna Jones and Gwen Cooper. Gemma smiled at them and held out her hand. Gemma Simmons. Leo Fitz added, holding his hand out as well. Gemma looked over her shoulder. Melinda May, our boss Phil Coulson, and our director, Nick Fury. Jack threw up a salt. Sir? Ma'ams? Fury nodded. Who are you? Captain Jack Harkness, Jack replied. His gaze went to Gemma, and he gestured toward the tables. I think you'll want to be sitting for this. Gemma sat immediately, Jack across from her. Why? She asked. Jack folded his arms, a torn look on his face. When Jessie and the doctor came here, he began, and Gemma's eyes widened. Did they tell you about a werewolf in Victoria, England? Yeah, Fitz replied, nearing his eyes. Jessie swore never to see or read Harry Potter in the Prisoner of Azkaban again. Jack closed his eyes. There was an estate there, called Torchwood. I've heard of them, Fury said, folding his arms. The Torchwood Institute, started by Queen Victoria. Jack nodded. Since I found it, it's been rebuilt. But before I found it, it was an organization to fight, he swallowed, against the doctor, if he ever returned. Wait a minute, Coulson said, leaning forward. Rebuilt? Jack looked at Gwen, who pulled something out from under her coat. A few days ago, there was a war in London, he said, looking at them. I'm surprised you haven't heard, but when I did, I came here as fast as I could. A war? May asked in surprise. More like a battle, Jack said as Gwen pulled out a file folder and handed it to him. But the casualties were large enough for a war, and it was at Cantry Wharf. But to those who knew, it was Torchwood Tower. What did they do? Fury asked. All that I know is that they stuck their noses into something too far, Jack said, shrugging and opening the folder he had picked out of a few papers. And they paid the price. Why are you here? Gemma asked. Jack swallowed. This wasn't a social call. I wanted to give these to you myself. He looked down at the papers, then sighed and slid them across the table to her. And I wanted to say that I wish I didn't have to. Gemma took the papers, frowning when she saw names on them. What is this? She asked as the others crowded around her. This time, Jack didn't answer, and it looked like he couldn't. Gwen was a wreck, crying. Ayana's voice cracked when he gave the answer for them all. The casualties. Gemma skimmed the list, not sure what she was looking for, but then her blood chilled. Torchwood Tower, Canary Wolf, London. She clapped a hand over her mouth when she saw the 3 names. Skye, Celine Harper, Jessie Nightshade. No, she whispered, looking up at Jack in horror. But she knew it was true when tears began forming in his eyes as well. Tell me this isn't right. So many people are missing, Gwen choked out. Aya's arms are around her as Fury took the files, staring at them hard. Fitz sitting next to her, staring at the table. And so many reported dead, and the war was with the Cybermen and Daleks, all over the world. And they just disappeared. Something that sounds like the Doctor, Jack put in. And where the Doctor is, Jessie's there too, Coulson managed to get out. And Celine. Parallel world, May said, standing, swallowing. There were Cybermen in that world. If they crossed over, Celine must have too. And now they're dead, Gemma whispered. Her voice choked. Oh my god. A hand reached for hers, and she looked up, and Jack was crying too. I'm sorry, he whispered. Gemma stood up, and he did too, and he nudged her tightly as she burst into sobs, and later Fitz joined the group hug. It was a punch in the gut. And Gemma swore on whatever god existed that next time she saw the Doctor, she was going to kill him, so he'd never regenerate again. 56 hours. Not enough, the TARDIS thought as she danced through the vortex, watching her wolf not respond to anything she did. Not enough. She hoped for more time, but it wasn't enough. Not enough to fully complete what she'd been hoping to do. But maybe. She smiled. Yes, that might work. 49 hours. 23 hours since she'd died. Since she's died. In that time, the Doctor was looking for one last small crack in time and power source large enough to get him through it. Neither Skye nor Celine had returned, which meant that they had either wanted to stay or Grant had physically forced Skye to stay. He swallowed, looking over at Jessie's body, laying attached to various wires, because even though he knew she was dead, he wanted to take her back to S.H.I.E.L.D. They deserved that much. He shook his head when the TARDIS singing increased in the back of his head. What are you doing, old girl? He asked out loud. She didn't answer. 34 hours. It would be enough. The TARDIS estimated she had until the end of the 3rd day to succeed. She promised herself that she would. Her wolf had warned to stay. And stay, her wolf would. What's going on? Gemma squeezed her eyes shut again when she heard the voices of Natasha Romanoff. Jack rubbed her neck, looking over her shoulders. Agent Romanoff, he greeted, his voice sounding a little dry. Agent Barton, Captain Rogers, Mr. Stark, Dr. Banner. Okay, how does he know who we are? Tony asked. Gemma peeked over her shoulder, still clinging tightly to Jack, and Natasha instantly stepped forward. What happened? She demanded. Just as followed. London, the Doctor, he. What about him? Steve asked, looking back and forth between them all. Jack cleared his throat. 2 of your own are dead, 3 from S.H.I.E.L.D. Natasha's eyes widened. No. Fury handed her the casualties list, and Natasha ripped them from his hands. The other Avengers crowded around, and Gemma buried her face into Jack's shoulder again, so she couldn't see their looks of horror. And it didn't block out Natasha's cry of horror and Steve's exclamations, and the swears from Clint, but she was glad she couldn't see their faces. From the way Jack squeezed her hard, she was sure they weren't happy. 20 hours. She was getting closer. The vortex was spinning in her wolf's blood, and she elevated her own instruments to stop her thief from noticing. He was in his own world, seeming to avoid her, except for when he came in at the same time nowadays. The same time when she hit the wall at Canary Wolf. She bristled. How dare Torchwood try and take her wolf from her, thief? But it was in a good hands now. Stop. Okay. The captain her wolf brought back was a leader to be proud of, but our thief was getting closer to finding the supernova needed to bridge the gap between the parallel worlds. When he made it, there was nothing that she could do, but at the rate she was working, she would be done. She left her thoughts at that and concentrated back on her wolf. 8 hours. The TARDIS was up to something. The Doctor knew that. He frowned about the ceiling, reclining the captain's chair. What are you up to? He asked. The TARDIS hummed. What? She asked. The Doctor shook his head. Are you close to finding the supernova? He asked, or the crack. I'm working on it, he replied. Patience. The Doctor growled, leaping up from his seat. Patience? He asked bitterly. Patience? You want me to be patient while I wait for a crack in time to open up so I can appear to her best friends for who knows how long to tell them that she's dead? How can I be patient about that? The TARDIS didn't answer, but he thought he sensed a bit of urgency as she left his mind. He shook his head, looking at the clock he had running. 64 hours he had gone since Canary Wolf. It was close to the end of the 3rd day. He shook his head. That long, and he swore he was going mad. He saw her everywhere he went. a teasing grin on his face, and then she would just be gone. Her shield crests were still in her room, and she hadn't had the heart to ask the TARDIS to make it go. Knowing his ship, she wouldn't let him allow it to go. But still, 900 years had gone up by in a flash, so why were 3 days enough to make him start to go insane? He shook his head, putting it in his hands. The next time I see Torchwood, he growled, they are dead. 3 hours. She would finish. She knew it as soon as she was done with her wolf's chest. It wasn't enough for a full transformation, but it would keep her wolf with her thief forever. When the 2 types of blood and DNA that now ran in her wolf's veins, the wolf would never die until her thief did. And that was a very long time. She smiled to herself. Now she just had to wait for the end of the day. 3 minutes. The doctor sat in a chair, staring at Jessie. He narrowed his eyes. Was it just him, or was there a little color left in her skin? And did he see a flash of white gold? He shook his head, standing and sighing as he looked back at the wires. He really did need to get rid of them. He had to face it. She wasn't coming back. He walked over to the sink, got a glass of water. When he took his sip, the clock struck, signaling the end of the day. The end of the hour when Jessie died. But his eyes widened and he choked on his drink when he heard something he definitely shouldn't have. The monitor's wires hooked up to Jessie had begun to beep. And the hot monitor was going as well, but it wasn't just one heart. It was 2. Chapter 24. The end of the 3 days. The doctor's eyes widened, and he leaned back against the sink in shock. What? He shouted in disbelief. The TARDIS hummed in his mind, sounding happy. It worked! What worked? He ran over to the monitors, double-checking them before shaking his head and looking up at the ceiling. What have you done? He demanded. For Emma was promised, and now she has it. You brought her back, he whispered, and the 2 heartbeats. But that means... He slowly turned to take another look at Jessie. Her skin was definitely coloring again, but worse. He saw the white gold energy rushing up under her skin. She's regenerating. Jessie's eyes snapped open at that minute, and she let out a sharp cry. The doctor winced when he heard it, and he ran over to her. Jessie! Doctor, she cried out, sitting up, clutching at her head. Oh my God, my head! What have you done? He demanded again, looking around at the TARDIS. The TARDIS hummed. It is done. Jessie looked at the doctor, her eyes wide in shock. Doctor, why do I have 2 heartbeats? She demanded. Doctor, how am I still alive? You were dead, he managed to say, looking at her with as much surprise as she was looking at him. You were dead for 3 days. Her eyes widened. Oh my God. The TARDIS brought you back somehow, the doctor continued, swallowing and taking one of her hands and holding it up for her to see. Those beats you feel? 2 hearts? Jessie took in the white gold swirling under her skin, and she looked at the doctor slowly. That means... The doctor nodded, still trying to adjust to the thought himself. Yeah, you're regenerating. A burst of energy went from her hand, and the doctor stumbled away when it hit him. Jessie cried out in pain, her hands going to her temples. It hurts. Your body's denying it, he guessed, staying away. Let it go, Jess. Just let it go. Jessie swallowed, looking at him, and his eyes widened in shock when he saw the gold swirling in her eyes. My doctor, she whispered in a reverberating voice. No, he whispered. That's not possible. I took it out of you. Yes, you did, the TARDIS agreed, and I put it back in. Jessie let out one final scream before her body exploded with the white and gold energy. The doctor jerked down when the energy rushed towards him, throwing an arm over his eyes against the burning bright light. When it faded, an entirely different woman had stumbled back into the bed. His eyes widened in shock when he took in the blonde-haired woman, her hair strangly and at least halfway down her back. Her eyes flickered around the room, and instantly, instead of the warmth, almost whiskey color they had been before, they were now a sapphire coloring. And she took a deep breath and looked at the doctor. What the hell was that? She asked, in a completely different voice. His jaw dropped in astonishment, and her own eyes widened. Australian, she said blankly, looking down at herself in surprise. I sound Australian. Wow, was all the doctor could say. Jessie took a deep breath and looked back up. Okay, she said slowly. I'm completely different, and I feel 2 heartbeats. So what does that make me? Half Asgardian, the TARDIS replied, and the doctor looked up at the ceiling at the same time as Jessie. Half, time lady. Was that the TARDIS? Jessie asked in astonishment. The doctor nodded. Yeah, he said, then cleared his throat. Yeah, that was the TARDIS. Wow, Jessie repeated what he said earlier, taking another deep breath. This is really different. I guess that's what happens when you promise forever, the doctor said, a little sharper than he intended. Jessie looked around, folding her arms. Yeah, she agreed. I guess it is. Do you regret it? Jessie chewed the inside of her cheek, rocking on her heels. No, she admitted, although, she pointed to the door. Can I? He nodded, and she walked out, her steps longer than before, and she went somewhere he didn't know. When she was completely out of the room, the doctor took a deep breath of his own and looked up at the TARDIS. You, he said slowly, are a complete schemer. She hummed happily, as if taking it as a compliment. The doctor sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. So he had his companion back. That was something to be happy about. The problem he was sure he would have, however, was accepting that this really was Jessie. She was calmer, not to mention completely different. He knew regeneration had been bad on his companions in the past, but accepting it happened right in front of him, that would take some getting used to. Jessie opened the door to her room, and she gasped in surprise when she saw it had been transformed. There were still the Asgardian relics, but the Bifrost Bridge and the mural and the 9 realms on the ceiling. But where the violet bed had been was now a diamond white, where the black had been was a dazzling gold. She ran a hand over the dresser and looked at her bed, smiling when she saw the swirls of the same diamond white color in her gold bedspread. The diamond white was forming the same Gallifreyan word she saw often on the TARDIS monitors. But now she could read it. The woman who once died, risen 3 days later from the grave, she read, then looked up at the TARDIS. 3 days, she asked with a laugh. I can think of another story like that. The TARDIS hummed in her mind. I could not turn you into a full-time lady. This was what I could do when the time given. Jessie shook her head with a smile on her face. I still don't know how to take this, she admitted, running a hand through her hair, still jumping a little surprised when her fingers touched blonde strands instead of dark brown. It will take some time, my wolf, the TARDIS said. In time, you will know what you can do. Jessie sat down on her bed, leaning back and looking up at the ceiling. How's he taking it, she asked. The TARDIS paused. It will take some time for him, too, I am afraid. Jessie let her breath out in a whoosh, flopping down on her head on her pillow. That's not a surprise, she admitted. He watched you sleep for 3 days, and he saw you wake up suddenly with 2 hearts, the TARDIS told her. It was hard to take in. Why did you do it? Jessie couldn't help but ask, looking around. Why do you do all of this if it just makes them afraid? The Doctor and the Bad Wolf, the oncoming storm and the Goddess of Time. In the TARDIS as it should be, the TARDIS sang. Jessie blushed. Is that really why? You healed his hearts, my wolf. The Doctor needs someone, and I have never seen him need anyone more than you. Jessie huffed, sitting up. Even if it's a different me? If it is a you, that could stay with him forever. Jessie slowly began to smile. Forever? As long as he lives, that is a very long time. Jessie grinned. TARDIS, if you were a person in front of me, I could hug you right now. The TARDIS laughed in her head, and she felt a warm feeling encompass her. Go to him. I will, Jessie promised, but first... She walked over to the wardrobe, opening it and folding her arms. I need a new look. The Doctor brightened when the TARDIS scanners lit up. You found it, he cheered. Ha! Found what? The Doctor jumped a little, still getting used to that new voice. A supernova with enough energy to at least send a message to the parallel world. He froze when he turned and saw the blonde Jessie there, leaning up against one of the coral structures, arms folded. And you look completely different. She looked over herself, frowning a little. What do you think about it? The Doctor looked her up and down, noting the changes. She was obviously more comfortable with showing more skin than her last version had been, because she was wearing a gray tank top with only 3-finger-wide straps. But she kept the jeans, even if they were a darker blue than last time, and black combat boots wrapped it all up. He raised an eyebrow at the gloves she wore, fingerless, into her wrists. Black. It's new, definitely. She quirked an eyebrow at him. I look completely different, and you think the outfit is weird? The Doctor shrugged a little. I complain more about the voice. Jessie made a face. Yeah, I'm still getting used to it. I'll have to get used to it longer, the Doctor thought dryly as she walked up to him. You said we could get through to the parallel world? If I try, the Doctor agreed. Give me a minute to try and get through. Jessie took a deep breath and nodded, sitting down in the captain's chair. All right. Celine? Celine grumbled in annoyance and rolled over in her sleep. Celine. She furrowed her eyebrows. Wait a minute. Celine. She jerked upright in bed, gasping when she recognized the voice. She looked around, then slid out and grabbed her bathrobe. Skye, she shouted. Grant! Jake! She ran down the stairs of the Ward mansion, going for the living room. She crouched down and lit the fireplace, then looked up when she heard people coming down the stairs. A blurry-eyed Jake was the one who appeared first. Celine, he asked groggily. It's 2 a.m. I had a dream, she interrupted. It was the Doctor, I'm sure of it. Jake blinked himself awake and made it more quickly down the stairs. There was a squeak, then Skye was running downstairs too. You heard them? She asked desperately. Celine sat on the couch, pulling her legs under her. Well, she said slowly, I had this dream. Okay, I'll actually do the epilogue in this. So this is the epilogue. The Doctor straightened, looking over at Jessie. They're coming. Jessie nodded, swallowing a little. I'm ready. Celine threw the door of Grant's car shut and ran onto the beach of Darloch Straden, looking around desperately, hoping she hadn't been wrong. Celine? The Doctor's voice kept calling out to her, and she walked slowly towards the water's edge. narrowing her eyes and looking out across it. Celine! The air warped next her, and Celine slowly turned. The doctor's image appeared, and next to him was a blonde-haired woman she didn't know. Celine swallowed, looking at them. "Where are you?" she asked. "Inside the TARDIS," the doctor replied. "There's one tiny little gap in the universe left, just about to close, and it takes a lot of power to send this projection. We're in orbit around a supernova." The blonde cracked a small grin. "We need to burn up his sun to say goodbye." Celine walked forward. "You look like ghosts." The doctor held up a finger. "Hold on." He held out his hand, holding the sonic screwdriver, and the image adjusted. Celine took one more look at the blonde, and her eyes widened. "Oh my God." Celine smiled weakly. "Recognize me?" "No," Celine choked out, holding a hand over her mouth. "What happened to you?" "Looking into the heart of the TARDIS has its benefits," her changed best friend chuckled. "The void tried to pull me in, but it closed just in time. My skull caved in, and I was dead for 3 days." Celine quirked an eyebrow at the irony, and Jessie laughed. "I thought the same thing, and apparently stubbornness helped make me into half a time lady." She held out her arm, and I turned into an Aussie. Celine grinned. "You got your forever." Jessie nodded, biting her lip. Yeah, I did." Celine bit her lip too, holding up a hand. "Can I?" "We're still just images," the doctor said, shaking his head. "No touch." Celine slumped, looking at both of them. "Can't you come through properly?" He shook his head again. "The whole thing would fracture. 2 universes would collapse." Celine tried to smile for their sake. "So, it worked." Celine gave a small laugh, and the doctor shook his head with a smile before looking around curiously. "Where are we?" he asked. "Where did the gap come out?" Celine rolled her eyes. "You had to call me Norway, didn't you?" "Norway?" Jessie snorted loudly. "Norway, right." She looked at the doctor. "Nice job." "About 50 miles out of Bergen," Celine said. "It's called Dalek Ulvenstriden." "Dalek?" the doctor asked in surprise, Jessie's eyes widening. Celine chuckled at their nervousness. "Darleg," she corrected. Norwegian for bad. She grinned at them. "Guess what it translates to?" Jessie quirked an eyebrow, and Celine chuckled again. "Bad Wolf Bay." Jessie shook her head, grinning. "Of course it does." She swallowed and looked at the doctor. "How long have we got?" she asked. The doctor sighed. "About 2 minutes." Jessie's breath came out in a whoosh, and she shook her head, tears forming in her eyes. "And I can't even think of what to say." The doctor looked over Celine's shoulder, and he brightened. "Still got that Jakey boy with you, then?" Celine turned to see Grant, Sky, and Jake leaning against the car. "I think I've already met that car." "No, I haven't." "Shush. You're messing me up now." I can't even think of what to say." The doctor looked over Celine's shoulder, and he brightened. "Still got the Jakey boy with you, then." I already read that. Celine turned to see Grant, Sky, and Jake leaning against the car. Grant's arms were on Sky, the two of them with their eyes narrowed at Jessie. Celine shook her head and mouthed Jessie at them. Sky's jaw dropped, and she put a hand over her mouth, and Grant rubbed her back. Jake gave a thumbs up, and Celine shook her head again, turning back with a grin. "Yeah, I've still got Jake. There's a bunch of us now. Me and Jake and a few of my old friends from the war. Grant and Sky in the mansion," she smiled. "And the baby." Jessie's eyes widened. "You're not—" Celine shook her head. "No, it's Sky." Jessie put her hands over her mouth, and the doctor smiled. "She's 3 months gone. She and Grant got married again, almost as soon as they could." "And what about you?" the doctor asked. Celine shrugged. "I'm back to working at S.H.I.E.L.D. Sky's working there again as well. Luckily, the S.H.I.E.L.D. team back home isn't operating in this area." "Good for you." Celine snorted. "Oh, shut up. No, I'm not." Jessie smirked, and Celine sighed, looking at the ground. "I don't know. There's still a Torchwood on this planet opening for business." She raised her head, looking at the doctor. "I think I know a thing or two about aliens that they can use." "Celine Harper, Defender of the Earth," the doctor tried out, nodding his approval. "I like that." Jessie smiled. "Celine, we're dead officially back home. So many people died that day, and we've gone missing. We're on a list of the dead. You, me, and Sky." Celine nodded, and the doctor smiled. "Here you are, though, living a life day after day. The one adventure I could never have." "But you have Jessie," Celine pointed out. Something flickered across the doctor's face when he turned to Jessie. 30 seconds, he said. Jessie sniffed, rubbing at her eyes, and Celine began to cry too. "Am I ever going to see you again?" she asked. The doctor shook her head, unable to talk, and the doctor answered for her. "You can't," he said apologetically. "What are you going to do?" The doctor shrugged. "Oh, we've got the TARDIS. Same old life. Last of the Time Lords." "On your own," Celine said slowly. "Both of you." She shook her head. "Doctor, you better take care of her if it's the last thing you do. She'll be out to murder you." "Quite right, too," the doctor agreed with a grin. "And Celine?" "I will. Good luck." "I love you," Celine shouted to them as the images wavered. "I love you, too," Jessie shouted one last time before the image warped entirely. The image disappeared, and Celine blinked her tears away, sobbing as she turned away. Skye instantly ran towards her, Jake not too far behind. Celine crushed into Skye, hugging her tightly and crying hard. Skye crying as well. They were stuck. Forever. Celine held her hand to her mouth and turned away from the console. She didn't react when the doctor squeezed her shoulder sympathetically before moving around the console. She leaned against the coral structure, struggling with the fact that her best friends were now gone. She slid down the structure to the floor, burying her face in her arms as her tears kept flowing. In fact, the only time she took notice of anything was when the doctor squeaked in shock. "What?" he asked. Jessie sniffed and looked up, and she stiffened when she saw Ginger, all in white with a veil on the TARDIS. "Oh, that's just not fair," she said dryly. "Why did this have to happen?" The figure turned, and she squeaked as well. "Oh, what?" the doctor repeated, still staring in shock. Jessie slowly stood. "Doctor? Who are you?" the Ginger demanded. "But," the doctor protested, looking at the console. "How the hell did that happen?" Jessie asked. "Where am I?" the Ginger asked, looking from the doctor to Jessie. "What?" Jessie asked blankly. The Ginger turned to her angry. "What the hell is this place?" she almost roared. The doctor and Jessie turned to each other and said the same thing at the same time. "What?" Okay, so that's the end of the second book in the Bad Wolf series. Alrighty. I hope you guys enjoyed this playlist. My next playlist is going to be a Jeff the Killer. And it's a book I've never read before, so that'll be fun. And then I don't know what I'll do after that. So, yeah. Peace out, Knights.